Greg Kline is from Anne Arundel County, served for 3 years as counsel to the Anne Arundel County Central Committee, longtime activist, Severna Park resident, and he's running for state party chair. Now we control anywhere between about 20 and 25% of the total vote. I think about 20% of the votes cast at the convention, which means that
looking in this direction,
which shows a certain amount of smarts that Greg came up and came to talk to us. And if we maintain solidarity within our vote, we could potentially determine the next chair of the party. So, with that being said, Greg, don't screw up, all right?
Thanks, appreciate it. I know I'm added to the agenda, and I don't want to take too much time. I know you have a lot to get through. Let me just introduce myself, tell you why I'm running. My name is Greg Kline. I'm a native Marylander. I was born in La Plata, grew up in Frederick County. I've lived down in Severna Park for the last 16 years, graduated from college at UMBC. After I got out of law school, my wife and I got married, and we moved to Anne Arundel County, where we've lived ever since. I've been an activist. I'm a lifelong Republican, and an activist all of my adult life, from college with the College Republicans to the Federal Society and law school. When I got out of law school, I worked with a guy by the name of Steve Wehner, who was a great mentor of mine, who at the time was the counsel to the Maryland Republican Party when Joyce Terry's was chairman. If you can remember back that far. He represented Tony O'Donnell when he first got elected in a challenged election. I worked with him with the Salabray campaign, with the disputed alderman election in Annapolis in '97. I was president of the Young Republicans in Anne Arundel County for a couple of years. As the chairman mentioned, I was counsel to our central committee there for 3 years under 3 different chairmen. I ran for the House of Delegates in 2006 in District 33A. It was a competitive primary, top 2 advanced. I came in 3rd. It was a rough and tumble primary, but when it was over, I shook the winner's hands, went to the unity breakfast, and worked with poll for our Republican candidates in November. One of the things I learned in that campaign was that there wasn't a media for local conservatives throughout the state. There were a lot of good Republicans in my district, my neighbors, who listened to Rush Limbaugh and read the Washington Times and watched Fox News, but didn't know what was going on in local politics. So I, with a number of other people, got together and formed Red Maryland. If you've heard of Red Maryland, redmaryland.com, to create that conservative platform to get our message out. I've been involved with Red Maryland for the last 6 years. We've grown now. We have a radio network that we have shows every night promoting that. And there's lots of other great bloggers throughout the state as well. So that's where my activism has been. In 2006, I'm also proud to say I was part of the team that stopped the General Assembly from firing the Public Service Commission, if you remember that. We argued that case in front of the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals actually agreed with us that the General Assembly had gone too far, and there's a precedent now for the limits of the power of Mike Bush and Mike Miller. So that's, and it was Governor O'Malley, Mayor O'Malley at the time, trying to become governor. The reason that I'm running for state party chair, and I've got a very detailed plan, which we're going to outline in more detail tomorrow. I'll be on C4 show at noon on WBAL. And I'd be happy, I spoke with some of you, I'm sure I'll be talking to you all a lot more between now and the convention in November. But the reason I'm running for state party chair is that I think we need to change the culture of leadership that we have in the state party. We've had too many state party chairs who've taken the job because they wanted to run for office, they wanted they were looking out for their own personal parochial interest. We've had a lot of infighting within our party. We've had a lot of factional disputes that's kept everybody from working together for the greater good. I feel we need a different kind of chairman, a chairman who's going to take responsibility for the failures that we have, who's going to spread the success, someone who's not in it for themselves, but in it for the greater good. I think as an activist for the last almost 20 years, I've shown that that's the kind of person that I am. That kind of different leadership is going to manifest itself in the way that the state party does business, in the way we approach fundraising, in the way that we communicate, in the way that we do candidate recruitment. And we have some very specific plans about how we change those things. But I think in those areas, and if I could just give a quick example, We've seen where kind of the dysfunction of our state party leadership, for lack of a better term, has affected us. When we talk about candidate recruitment, we all remember in 2010 we didn't have a candidate for Attorney General. And if you know the story behind that, you know it's a perfect example of what we're doing wrong as a party. We didn't get somebody on board before the deadline, and then after the deadline, we couldn't name someone because we got bogged down in internal disputes and factional infighting. Another area is fundraising, and I know a lot of people are very concerned about fundraising. Gotten on better financial footing over the past couple of years. We don't want to go backwards, but the way that we run the state party has kept us, and again, I'll get into more detail on this starting tomorrow, and we'll have a plan that we'll roll out. But we've got some real concern. People have lost confidence in our party. We've become too dependent as a state party on internal sources of revenue. You know, when the state party looks to raise money, they look to folks like you first to do that. When you need those resources for your own mission, we need to move away from that. So those are some of the things that we touch on, that a different style of leadership would do things in a different way. We need to communicate our message to take advantage of that new medium that's out there on the internet, to tie in our candidates, to give them exposure, to spread our message. We've never coordinated very well with the blogosphere, with the citizen journalists throughout the state who are trying to spread our party's message, and we need to do a better job that we can do that. And by doing so, we have a very cost-effective way to balance the playing field with the Democrats. So that's definitely one thing I'd like to do. I'd like to see us as a state party interact more in a two-way communication with local central committees. We have some specific plans about how we go about doing that, and do some informal changing of the organizational structure. Again, lots of details to follow that. That'll be coming out, and again, I'll be on WBLC4 tomorrow at noon. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Kline, that's Kline, for MDGOP Chair. Kline for MDGOPchair.com is our website. My Twitter handle is @GregoryKline. You can feel free to contact me there. And we will obviously be in communication with all of you guys in the coming weeks. Our convention is April 20th. That's when we'll pick our new chair. And so I look forward to speaking with all of you who I've met tonight more so, and those I haven't had a chance to speak to, speaking with you personally over the next few weeks.
Great, thank you. I'm going to take comments, or questions rather, from the committee. Eugene, Catherine.
All right, I do like a lot of your ideas, and I do think a lot of the points that you hit are major issues and topics. I have two questions, I guess.
Okay.
Multi-part question. One, if elected chair, what would you do to grow the party statewide? And two, if elected as chair, what would your game plan be for PG County, Baltimore City, and Montgomery County?
Well, first off, one of the specific goals that I think we need to have as state party is what I call state party. It's called filling out the roster. One of the acute problems we have in just some of the jurisdictions that you talked about is getting candidates to run and getting that. And unfortunately, one of the problems we've had is we've looked at that as a local central committee issue, as a local issue, rather than accepting, you know, that's a statewide goal that we need to have. You know, we had a state senator in the last election who was under indictment waiting trial in federal court, and we didn't even have a Republican on the ballot, just a name on the line there. So we've got to do a better job than that. Part of the way that we can grow the party, first and foremost, is restoring confidence that the state Republican Party is a functional institution. I think we've kind of lost a lot of that. You know, we had a chairman who we had a tough election that we just went through. We had a chairman who has resigned now and appears to have moved out of state. So whether that's fair or not, that's kind of the public image that we have, and we need to restore that. So we need to, one of the things we do with fundraising is we need to have specific electoral goals. We have something we call our 1914 plan. I'll be talking about that tomorrow. To grow the party, to interact with conservative groups, all of our stakeholders, and to inspire people that this is actually something they can buy into and can be successful, because I think there's a great deal to tap into. And we have a lot of resources to do that.
Kathy?
You talked about the infighting in our party.
Yeah.
So talk about some of the traits you have or characteristics, or how are you going to eliminate that or at least drastically reduce it?
Well, I think one of the things you have to do is, it's a cultural issue. So you need a chairman who is going to, who's not looking to get something out of the job. In other words, if we fail when I'm chairman, I'm going to say, it's my fault. I'm going to accept responsibility for that. I'm not going to send an email saying we're on the verge of turning red when we got our clock clean. That's part of it. I'm not someone who's looking to run for office. I'm not someone who's involved in some of those factional things. So inherently, I believe, just as an activist coming in, there's some trust that can be built up. Obviously, it's got to be communication. We've got to be more collaborative. We've got to be more transparent about what we're doing with regard to fundraising and those kinds of things. I think when we talk to folks in Montgomery County and Prince George's County, we need to have statewide ownership of the problems they face. And one of the problems we have in our party is that, other places benefit when they aren't successful. We need to at least change that as a cultural way that we do things. And I think if you do that, you can build the trust that people, and you can build the buy-in that people are going to need to have to close some of those gaps.
Questions on this side? Questions on this side. Rudy?
We've been up here in Baltimore County very involved in the petitions effort in the past election. Obviously, we had a nice presentation beforehand as to what the future of the petitions and the referendum issues might look to. What is your vision of the state party's involvement in referendum items in the future?
I think that getting those items to the ballot for the first time in decades was an enormous achievement for our party. It's not a surprise that the Democrats are trying to shut it down. What we need to do, and one of the things that was so frustrating for all of us about the last election, is we did all that heavy lifting to get it on there. We fought the legal challenges, we did all those kinds of things, and then we couldn't see it over the finish line. And we had some really close questions, some of which the two closest questions, the state party was either silent on or wasn't doing as much as they should have done. I think on those kinds of issues, we need to look at that ability to referendum things on as a people's veto, as an opportunity for us to defeat the Democratic machine at the ballot box in ways that we couldn't have done. We had a great chance on the gambling thing, and it didn't happen. I don't think a lot of us know why the party did or didn't do what they did. And I think that those are some questions that need to have answered. The fact that we don't know is itself a problem. But I see it as a big part of our future if we can defend it and not let the Democrats take it away from us.
Over here, Jane?
No, it's sort of my question that you sort of answered. But I have another question.
Sure.
How many hours do you intend to work every week on the job?
I don't have any illusions about the job. I have a solo practice in Severna Park, which is only about 10 miles from the state party headquarters. So I plan to work pretty close to full-time in the office and balancing what I do. I have the flexibility to do that. My daughter's a little older now, and my wife is able to help out with that. So I have a little more time than I did earlier in my career. So I look at spending a lot of time over the few months that we have over this term to do that. It's tough. This is a tough job because it's a volunteer job. It's challenging. It's herding cats a lot of times, and one of the reasons a lot of people that we've talked to that said no is just the kind of thing that you mentioned. To have somebody who's engaged and professional and involved that's still going to have the time to do it is tough, but I think I can do it. So.
Anyone else on this side? Paul?
I have a question for Paul Lewis. Something that maybe Mr. Stoller had indicated, but the idea of referendum and making it more difficult and saying more signatures and jumping through more hoops and more red tape to discourage people. He brought about like a system of checks and balances that the voters can decide for themselves if they like some of the legislation that's going through in Annapolis. Just from your personal perspective, as far as the referendum issue, why do you think the marriage issue, which many of us worked very hard to see put on the ballot, why do you think that went up in flames?
We got out hustle is what it comes down to. We got outspent. The turnout demographics didn't favor us. There was a much better coordinated effort on the other side to say yes all the way down the line. to these things. I think that was a big part of it. I mean, that's my own personal opinion. You know, one of the things that I really like about the petition process, when we got things on the petition, was that it showed really the strength of our party and our movement, because it was a disparate kind of thing. It was a grassroots kind of thing. So folks from different parts of the state, folks from different groups could all work together for a common goal, and we were able to do it. That's the kind of collaborative effort that we need to be successful. But I think at the end of the day, to answer your question, and this is just my opinion, looking at the numbers, you know, they just beat us. We didn't do enough to get it over the top.
If you were the state party chair, what would you have done differently?
I would have spent a lot more time and energy concentrating on it. Number one, I would have made it more of a focus of our fundraising effort, and I would have made saying no all the way down the line a central theme of what we were doing in that last election as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Eugene, let's go to people who haven't asked yet.
That's fine.
All right.
What are your thoughts on Rule 11?
I'm not a fan of it. I didn't think it was necessary, and I think we need to look at it. I understood why we did what we did. I understand getting the resources into the state that allowed it
Do you
to
know
happen.
what Rule 11? Could you give a number?
Oh, you want me to? So that was a quiz thing.
Well, just,
For those-
for the-
There was a controversy a couple of years ago, a few years, 2010 elections.
I know.
So the rule provides for the state party allowing these funds to come in, kind of an endorsement, and at least that's how it was perceived. You know, it was controversial because it helped Governor Ehrlich when he was running, who I supported. And it was perceived by the folks running against Governor Ehrlich as some sort of slight against them. It created divisions. Governor Ehrlich was going to win that primary. It probably wasn't necessary. It also helped Congressman Harris, who didn't have the same kind of competitive primary. I think that coming up in this cycle, I don't think this is going to be an issue. We're going to have a much more competitive primary at the top of the ballot and throughout. I think Congressman Harris is in a very strong position. So I don't see that coming up as an issue. It's definitely something that the central committees collectively need to look at how they do it. But at the end of the day, I think it was one of those controversies that engendered bad feelings that probably really wasn't necessary. It certainly wasn't handled in a way to avoid that.
Any questions? Greg, if you don't mind, Eugene, I'm going to ask one or two here.
Reach your quota.
Well, you've got, you know, I appreciate you coming up here. You made a lot of comments, some of which we have heard before, and some we haven't, so I'm glad. Can we talk about a few things like primary endorsements from central committees? Can we talk about independents voting in primaries? Can we talk about, let's see, instant runoff voting in our primaries perhaps? And maybe some sort of minimum threshold that the candidate must meet before he puts his name on the ballot. Because what it takes to run for office in this state is $50 and a pulse. So, you know, and then we have contested primaries that chew up the resources of candidates that have been working very hard to get there, and all of a sudden they've got to spend $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 to fend off a primary challenger who's really a no standing. So can you talk about a few of those issues, and are we going to do things structurally a little bit different under a Kline chairmanship?
I don't know that I necessarily would focus my attention on a lot of those issues particularly. When it comes to independents in our primaries, I'm not a fan of that. Don Murphy's scowling behind me. I'm not a fan of that. I think Republicans ought to pick their candidates. I don't think that that's led to any demonstrable success in general elections. I understand the points behind it. It's more often used as a tool to create some shenanigans in other elections that would be helpful. So I wouldn't be someone who would be inherently in favor of that. I have a little different view of primaries than you do. I don't know that primaries are all bad. I think there's a lot of things that are done with primary challenges that make our candidates better I think competition breeds success. I think a lot of the things that you do well in a primary campaign help you directly in November, addressing issues that come up, building organization, staying on point on messaging, working harder on fundraising. I don't think that they're all a negative. So I'm not looking to necessarily discourage that. As far as making it more difficult to get on the ballot, I think we have a much more acute problem filling out the roster statewide. So making a higher barrier to get on the ballot is going to help the Democrats a lot more than it's going to help us in the big picture.
Central Committee's endorsing in primaries?
I wouldn't be a fan of it. You know, I think that the central committees can have their own bylaws. I'm not a fan of it because I think it creates the very kinds of divisiveness that we have too much of already. Again, I'm not as afraid of primary contests as others might be. I think steel sharpens steel. I think competition breeds excellence. And I think we get better candidates in November if they have to work a little bit to get through the primary, especially when we have an earlier primary like we do now. You know, a lot of the same things you do in a primary to build name recognition, all that directly translates. So I think there's a lot, especially, unfortunately, when we have a lot of central committee members in a lot of different places who are running themselves or who are potential candidates. I think primary endorsements just is a recipe for more of what we have.
Hillary?
Can I ask a question just following up with, but would you support individual central committees being able to make that decision for themselves?
Of course, of course.
Very good. Eugene, Greg, can you guys exchange, I mean, unless it's absolutely pertinent, we're kind of expanded the agenda to include a few extra speakers. We're at 1 hour mark. I'd like to get to the business of the evening, I mean, unless it's done. Greg, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.